I was 6 months pregnant when I ran out of my own home barefoot in the rain. No phone. No shoes. No plan. Just me and my unborn baby running from the man I married. The man who was supposed to be my safe place. My best friend. I collapsed in the middle of the street. And the man who stepped out of that car was the last person on earth I expected. I didn't know him. But he knew me. He had been watching me for months. Protecting me from a distance. Because that baby I was carrying was his. And I had absolutely no idea. And if this story already has you, you are exactly who this channel was built for. Subscribe to Afro Seoul Romance Tales. Now, let me take you into the story that started it all. My name is Zara. Zara Neka Obi. Born in Lagos. Raised on my mother's prayers and the kind of stubborn love that teaches a girl to be strong long before she understands what that strength is going to cost her. I came to America for university on a scholarship I had bled for. I did not come looking for love. But love sat down next to me in a class I was already failing and slid its notes across the desk without a word. His name was Damon Cole. Easy in his skin. The kind of man who made a room feel lighter just by existing in it. One night he stayed until the library closed, helping me understand a concept that was never going to be on any exam. He just wanted me to understand it. That was Damon. That was who he was. Before everything else. He knew about my father who left when I was 9. He knew about the pressure of being the girl who left home with everyone's hope loaded onto her shoulders. I knew about his restlessness, that feeling of being slightly out of place everywhere he went. Like he was born searching for something he couldn't name. Looking back now, I wonder if that restlessness was always trying to tell him something. If something in him already knew what his mind hadn't caught up to yet. And then one evening he looked at me and said, "I don't want to do life without you." I said yes. It was the easiest yes I had ever given anyone. We got married. Small ceremony. The people who mattered. My mother flew in from Lagos and cried from the moment she landed. Damon's mother Renee came dressed beautifully and smiled for every photograph. But her eyes, when they landed on me, never warmed. I noticed it immediately. That was my first mistake. Giving time to someone who had already made up their mind. She did not want me in her son's life because I was Nigerian. That was it. No complexity underneath it. No logic she could defend in a room full of reasonable people. By year 2 the comments had started. At a family dinner, some women's bodies just take longer to settle into marriage. Said pleasantly. Said in front of enough people that reacting would have made me the problem. I smiled back. Went home. Sat in the bathroom with the tap running so Damon couldn't hear me. And Damon, my best friend, the man who once stayed until the library closed just to make sure I understood something, sat at that dinner table and said nothing. That silence broke me more than any word Renee ever said. Because there is a particular kind of pain that only comes from being let down by the one person whose whole purpose in your life is to choose you. 5 years of marriage. No baby. And every time I brought it up he shut it down before I could finish. We are fine, babe. Stop stressing yourself. So I stopped bringing it up. And I started carrying the weight of it alone. What I did not know, what I had no way of knowing, was that Damon was carrying something too. 3 years into our marriage, he had gone to a doctor alone. Told me it was a work appointment. Sat in a clinic on the other side of the city and received a diagnosis that changed the way he understood himself as a man. Severely low sperm count. The doctor was direct. At this count, the probability of natural conception without medical intervention is less than 1%. Not impossible, but as close to impossible as the numbers could get. He drove home in silence. He told me nothing. He started treatment quietly. Medication. Follow-up appointments he attended alone. Always a work excuse. Always exactly the right amount of time away. He told himself he was going to fix it before I ever had to know. He told himself that every month. Every year. For 5 years. And every time I suggested we see a doctor together he shut it down, not because he didn't care, but because sitting in that room with me meant the secret he had been carrying alone had nowhere left to hide. By year 4 Renee sat in my kitchen and said, "A woman who cannot give her husband children after this long is not fulfilling her purpose as a wife." Damon was at the table. He heard every word. He looked at his phone. And in that moment, something in me stopped waiting for him to choose me. I booked a fertility clinic appointment alone. A clinic on the other side of the city. I sat in that waiting room and looked at the couples around me. A woman across from me rested her head on her husband's shoulder. Eyes closed. She looked terrified and held at the same time. I looked at the empty seat beside me. And I opened my magazine. 3 days after the tests, the doctor called me back in. She said, "You are perfectly healthy. No issues. No abnormalities. Not a single medical reason why you should not be able to conceive naturally." She said, "The challenge, if there is one, is most likely not coming from your side. It would be very valuable to have your husband come in for his own evaluation." I thanked her. I walked to my car. I sat in that parking lot and did not move for a very long time. The issue is likely not on your side. That evening I told Damon everything. The appointment. The results. That the doctor wanted him to come in. Just so we could face whatever this was together. He stood up. Walked to the window. His back to me. And he said, "Drop it, Zara." Flat. Final. He still would not turn around and look at me while he said it. I had known this man for 7 years. Damon Cole had looked at me directly through every hard conversation of our shared life. He could not look at me now. He already knew. He had known before we got married. He had known through every conversation I tried to start. Every suggestion he waved away. Every night I carried the weight of our silence alone. And he had chosen that silence every single time. I did not say it out loud. Because saying it meant looking directly at the foundation of everything we had built and seeing the crack that had always been there. So I folded it. Carried it. Kept going. But something in me had permanently shifted. Something had quietly closed. Now the job offer. It came on a Wednesday morning. Damon called me from work sounding like a version of himself I hadn't heard in months. Alive. Excited. Like whatever had been dimming inside him had suddenly found a switch. One of Seoul's fastest growing tech companies wanted him. The kind of opportunity that doesn't come twice. He said, "I want us to go, Zara. A new city. A new chapter. Just us." And I said yes. Not because I wasn't scared. I was. Being asked to leave everything familiar and move to a country I had never lived in. But I said yes because I still believed in us. Because somewhere underneath everything that had been going wrong, I still believed that the man who once stayed in a library until closing just to help me understand something was still in there. What I did not know was that Damon's pull toward Seoul was not only about the job. He had always felt something drawing him toward Korea. Something he couldn't explain. Like something in his blood already knew that city before his mind ever did. He told me once, "It feels like something in me already knows that place." I thought it was poetic. I didn't know yet how dangerously literal he meant it. Renee's reaction when he told her was something I have replayed many times since. She didn't just disagree. She fell apart. Why Korea, Damon? There are opportunities everywhere. Why does it have to be Korea specifically? Her voice had an edge I had never heard before. Not her usual controlled precision. Something rawer. Something that sounded almost like fear. And I want you to understand something about that fear. Renee had left Korea 30 years ago carrying a secret she had never told anyone. But powerful men leave traces even across decades and even across oceans. Years ago, she had seen a name connected to something in the news. A name she had spent 30 years trying to forget. She knew he was still in Seoul. She knew what it would mean if Damon walked into that city. But she could not explain any of that without explaining everything. So she begged without being able to say why. When Damon mentioned feeling pulled to Korea, that something in his blood recognized that city, Renee went very quiet. Then she said some feelings are better left unfollowed. He didn't understand what she meant. Neither did I. Not yet. We moved anyway. And Renee, who had no real reason she could voice out loud, had no choice but to watch us go. I remember landing in Seoul for the first time. Quietly hopeful. Telling myself a new city meant a new beginning. That distance from Renee's voice would give our marriage room to breathe. The city was beautiful in a way that felt almost personal. Like it had been waiting. But I would learn very quickly that Seoul had been waiting for reasons I never could have anticipated. The first few months were better than I expected. Damon was energized. present in a way he hadn't been in years. For a brief window, I allowed myself to believe the move had been the right decision. I exhaled for the first time in years. I should not have exhaled so soon. Because underneath that surface calm, something was already moving. Not long after we arrived in Seoul, I found a private online forum. Women navigating impossible situations in silence. One woman mentioned a discreet anonymous donor program operating quietly in Seoul. Private. No records connected to a husband. No paper trail. She described it in a way that felt almost too specific. Like she knew exactly what a woman in my situation needed to hear. I told myself I was just reading. I went back the next night. And the night after. And on a Thursday evening while Damon was working late and Seoul was quiet outside our window, I sat there for a long time with the form open on my screen. My hands were not shaking. And that scared me more than anything. Because it meant I had already grieved the version of this that was supposed to happen naturally. Between two people who told each other everything. I signed. Alone. In silence. The way I had been carrying everything from the very beginning. I told no one. And if you have made it this far into the story, I need to ask you something before we go any further. What kind of story lives in your chest right now? The kind you have been carrying and never heard told out loud? Drop it in the comments. I am going to be down there reading every single one. Because the next story on this channel might just be yours. Now let me keep going. What I did not know sitting alone in that Seoul apartment in the dark was that I had just sent a signal to a man I had never met. The program I had accessed was not simply a private clinic. It was connected to something much larger. An underground network that existed in the spaces between legitimate systems. Used by powerful people for whom anonymity was not a preference, but survival. And the donor file I had selected had a history I knew nothing about. Years before, long before I arrived in Seoul, a woman connected to this network had wanted a child from a powerful man. He had agreed privately. The sample was stored. She disappeared from his life before ever using it. But because the network belonged to him, the file remained. Active. Coded. Waiting. When my file matched that code, his most trusted contact made one phone call. Not through any system. Person to person. The way real information moves in worlds like his. And the man who received that call already knew my name before I ever knew his existed. He had been watching me from the moment that call came in. Quietly. Carefully. The way a man watches over something he has already decided matters. I will tell you exactly who he is very soon. But first, what happened the moment I got pregnant? Because that is where everything broke open. I found out on a Tuesday morning. I had bought the test from a pharmacy on the other side of Seoul. The same way I had done everything in this marriage that mattered. Quietly. Alone. The test came back positive. I sat on the edge of the bathtub and pressed both hands flat against my stomach. And I talked to her. I already knew somehow that she was a her. I told her she was wanted. That she had been fought for. That she was the most deliberate and intentional thing I had ever done. That whatever came next, she had been chosen. Fiercely. Quietly. At great personal cost. I held the pregnancy to myself for 2 weeks. When I told Damon, his face moved through something I had never seen before. Not joy. Not relief. A calculation. Brief. Quickly covered. But I caught it before the smile arrived. He said the right things. Held me the right way. Everything on the surface looked exactly as it was supposed to. But I had felt what moved across his face before the performance started. And I filed it away. The way you file things you are not ready to open yet. What I did not know was what Damon did the very next day. He went back to his doctor in Seoul alone. Told them about the pregnancy. Asked if it was possible given everything he knew about himself. The doctor ran new tests. Sat across from him with the results. Then said, at your current count, the probability of natural conception without intervention remains less than 1%. Damon sat with that. Less than 1%. He researched everything. Every forum. Every medical journal. Every case study he could find. Less than 1% kept appearing in different forms. Different words. Same meaning. And for a man already hollowed out by years of shame and secret medication and quiet, desperate hope, less than 1% was not close enough to impossible to give him peace. It was close enough to destroy him. By 4 months pregnant, Damon had become someone I didn't fully recognize. He came home later, watched me from across the room with an expression I could not name. Something living in the space between suspicion and grief and a decision not yet made. 5 months. The questions started at night. Who had I spoken to? Where had I gone? Why had it taken me longer to answer his call? I answered everything. Patiently. Openly. But his questions were not looking for my answers. They were building a case. This is the part of the story women know. Not the dramatic part. The quiet part. The part where you are still cooking his food and answering his calls, while something inside you is watching everything and understanding things your mouth is not yet ready to say. I just didn't know how close it already was. Where in the world are you watching this from right now? Drop it in the comments before the next part of the story hits, because what happens in the next 60 seconds changes everything. This community reaches places I never imagined, and it moves me every single time. 6 months pregnant. He came home different that night. Not loud. Not immediately aggressive. Quiet. And I knew, the way women always know, that quiet was worse than loud. He sat across from me with eyes I had never seen on his face before. Cold where warmth used to live. Like he had already made a decision and was waiting for the right moment to act on it. He said, "Explain the pregnancy, Zara." I said, "Damon, what are you asking me?" He smiled. Not his smile. Something else wearing his face. He stood up slowly. Walked toward me the way you walk toward something you have already decided belongs to you. I stepped back. He stepped forward. I felt the wall behind me before I saw it. And in that moment I stopped thinking about saving my marriage. I stopped thinking about explanations. I stopped thinking about anything except the fact that the man standing in front of me was not the man I married. And my daughter needed me alive. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't look for my shoes. I looked for the door. And I ran. Out into the Seoul night. Into the rain. Bare feet on wet pavement. 6 months pregnant. Running harder than I had ever run from anything in my life. I could hear him behind me. I ran harder. My legs gave out. Not gradually. All at once. The ground came up to meet me and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Headlights cutting through the rain. A car stopped in the middle of the road. A door opening. A figure stepping out. Standing very still. Looking at me. And then nothing. When I opened my eyes, the rain was gone. The cold was gone. Clean sheets beneath me. A ceiling I didn't recognize. The smell of something faintly medical but not clinical. Somewhere private. Somewhere prepared for a specific purpose. My first thought before my eyes were fully open. My baby. I pressed both hands against my stomach. I felt movement. I exhaled so hard it became a sound. She was okay. A woman appeared. Calm. Professional. She told me I was safe. That a doctor had examined me and the baby was perfectly fine. I asked who had brought me here. She paused, just slightly. She said, "The man who owns this house." I was given water. Something warm. Clean clothes that somehow fit perfectly. I sat in that room trying to piece together everything I could remember. The rain. The running. Damon behind me. My legs giving out. The headlights. Then the door opened again. The man who walked in was not what I expected. Korean. Older but not old. Dressed simply in a way that communicated more authority than any expensive suit could. He moved through the room like a man who had never once needed to prove he belonged somewhere. He smelled like cedar and something older. Something that had no name, but felt like authority carried quietly for a very long time. He sat down across from me. He did not speak immediately. He just looked at me the way someone looks at something they have been waiting a long time to see. And the first thing he said was not "Who are you?" Was not "Why were you running?" He said, "Are you in pain?" I said, "I am okay." He nodded. Then, "The baby is fine. My doctor confirmed it. You are both safe here. I am not going to hurt you." I asked him who he was. He looked at me for a long moment. The kind that tells you what comes next will land differently from anything before it. He said, "My name is Seo Hyuntae, and I have been watching over you for several months." I know that sounds frightening. I am asking you to give me the chance to explain before you decide how to feel about it. I said, "Why would you watch over me? You don't know me." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I know more about you than you realize, Zara." He paused. "And what I am about to tell you is going to be very difficult to hear." He held my gaze. Steady. Unflinching. Like a man who has delivered impossible news before and learned that the kindest thing you can do is not look away while you do it. And that is where part 1 ends. Because what Seo Hyuntae says next is the secret that connects every single person in this story. The secret that explains why Renee panicked when Damon said Korea. The secret that explains why this man has been standing in the shadows of my life for months. The secret that is going to make you look back at everything you just watched and see it completely differently. Subscribe to Afro Seoul Romance Tales if you have not already. Drop a comment below and let me know you are here. Every single one of you watching right now is the reason this channel exists. Part 2 is coming. Stay with me.